Senator Rapert, this whole issue that has sprung up with Senate Bill 202 and House Bill 1228 and local ordinances regarding discrimination of protected classes, gays, lesbians, doesn't that boil down to an issue of the religion of some versus the rights of some? Isn't that what it comes down to? And don't you seem to believe that the religion of some should bear more on public policy than the rights of some?
No, actually I'm in complete agreement with the United States Civil Rights Act, which actually says that they will protect and not discriminate against anyone on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, or religion. Those first four characteristics are immutable. They're intrinsic. They cannot be changed with an individual, and religion is in the First Amendment. And what we have happening now is something that had never happened before in the entire tradition of our country, where you have cities based upon agendas of special interest groups who are now coming in and I guess being so arrogant as to say that they can describe for all of us what should be protected classes. You see those first four classes in the U.S. Civil Rights Act, every single person that walks around in the country at this time is affected by those things, one way or another, as well as religion.
But
and what's happening is that we have cities that are beginning to attempt, based upon purely a political agenda, that, by the way, is not supported by a majority of the people in this state, nor in many states, and it's causing trouble. It's interesting because, as you often say in some of your columns, that you can't legislate morality. This is exactly attempting to legislate morality, as the Family Research Council says, the morality of the sexual revolution that is now occurring as it relates to gender identity and sexual orientation.
Are you saying that the Civil Rights Act covers discrimination based on sexual orientation now?
It does not discriminate based upon race, color, national origin,
but that's not what I asked.
Or sex, or religion.
It is generally accepted that sexual orientation as a protection is not specifically covered in federal statutes.
And I'm saying that the U.S. Civil Rights Act, as well as current state law, is sufficient to prevent discrimination. When you begin to describe those classes, you are beginning to infringe upon then some of the rights of conscience and the rights of others as it relates to what they do in their own personal businesses.
You're back to you're back to the conflict then of some people's value system versus that specific right of a class that you do not think ought to be recognized. What I said, it's some people's religion versus other people's rights, basically, is the conflict.
Actually, I would tell you that frankly, some people object not on religion whatsoever, but on their own morality. There's no reason at this time to expand beyond what the U.S. Civil Rights Act had put in place. And again, I'm not the prime sponsor of those bills, but I definitely agree with those bills.
But you did get intimately involved, directly involved in the Conway case.
Yeah.
In your city you represent, the Conway City Council's proposal, which they passed, over your objections written and declared at the meeting, was to amend their own employee handbook for their own city government employees to specifically protect persons from discrimination in the workplace if they work for the city of Conway on account of whether being gay, lesbian, or transgender. And you said, I've got the direct quote here, but I can paraphrase it, and you know what you said. Basically, this bothers some people's religious views, puts them in a position of accepting things. Here's my question. How does employment rights that the city of Conway chooses to grant its employees based on their sexual orientation affect anybody's religion, anybody else's religion?
It definitely affects. I know we have a limited amount of time. It definitely affects because I personally met just a few days ago Fire Chief Kelvin Cochran, who was the fire chief in the city of Atlanta. Kelvin Cochran, by the way, is an African-American male who had a very pristine record, was well thought of by everyone, and he happened to also be a Bible study teacher. And he actually wrote a book, and in that book, he addressed what from his faith perspective says that homosexuality, in his words, was a sin. And he talked about that. He didn't discriminate against anyone at work. He didn't make any of his decisions based upon his religious convictions at work. But the mayor said that your book is objectionable because it disagrees with the city's position,
Well,
and they fired him.
that's not
and
exactly
he now
what the
has
mayor
a
said.
he now has a federal suit. I'm sure he'd be happy to talk with you because he has experienced exactly what that is. You see, the
Did
problem
not the mayor
going-
say,
Yeah,
for whatever
yeah,
reason,
yeah.
the mayor said he fired him because of his judgment rather than because of what the book said? Do you see a distinction there? Or? But I'm also wondering what that has to do with
the problem had never been, Mr. Brummett, until
I understand
he
that.
actually wrote the book.
That's
and they gave
Atlanta,
that.
and
Yeah.
that's one case. I'm talking about, you think
There are
something
multiple
like that
cases.
could happen in Conway because of a city employee handbook edition mentioning.
You can read, in fact, all of my comments that I gave at the city of Conway, which, by the way, there was a huge crowd that was there objecting, as well as multiple individual citizens, as well as multiple pastors that came and objected. You know, the media doesn't always report exactly fairly. Oftentimes, I've been the butt of some of your own jokes in the media,
Well,
and in spite of that, I still come and talk
You
with you
do, and I
because
appreciate that.
civility is important.
But
and
I'm-
in the
we're not being at all uncivil here, are they? We're having a discussion.
Well, I'm
right?
trying to, but you
Okay.
keep interrupting me.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
but we try to be civil about things, and I believe and respect that you may sincerely believe what you believe. But what's happening in America is that many people that object to what is being done here, which, by the way, you know, 97% of the people in this nation are not homosexual. Only 1 to 3% reported in statistics are actually homosexual. I know of nobody in Conway that had been fired. They actually stated that night that nobody has been discriminated against. What happened is that the mayor, his own decision to grandstand, which is a word that you like to use, said that we're going to show the world what Conway stands for. And what one of the most egregious things was, people objected really about the fact that they announced it on a Friday, passed it on a Tuesday, and literally didn't let anybody have any say-so. The people of Conway were not ready for this particular decision to be made. And also, we have public facilities. The Sports Center, we have the Don Owen Sports Center, the McGee Sports Center, we have ballparks. And what's happening is that by the city describing this class, if they have a male that says, I feel more like a woman and want to use that bathroom, how are you going to prevent a young girl that's there playing at a ball tournament from having to use a restroom with a male who says simply he just feels like a woman? People object to that. Well, the mayor decided that those objections of many people in the city of Conway just didn't mean enough, and he wanted to make this decision. He also said that he wanted to object to the legislature, which passed by a large margin the bills that would address what was happening as it relates to other businesses in public. They did do the handbook, but there are employees that disagree with what the mayor did. So from my perspective, this is an issue that is very, very serious. And what's happening is they're attempting to describe through these policies a viewpoint that really has no basis in our current existing civil rights law. And I can see that the city, and by the way, it's happened with public employers where they're opening themselves up to lawsuits. Look, I have serviced before personally in my business people that have told me that that's the lifestyle choice. I have a huge family. I have a couple of family members that have made those choices as well, okay? That's not something that I condemn them over. I tell them that I have a right to believe that that is not something that I would endorse, but that's a personal opinion. I never discriminate personally and would not want anybody to lose their jobs.
But don't you seek to take that personal opinion and apply it to public policy?
Well,
and by the way,
no,
no, that's not.
oh,
Here's my
okay.
question. What
You
is?
want to rephrase your
what
question?
Well, you can answer that one, also this one. I've heard you use this statistic, 1 to 3%, as if the fact that it's a small minority should limit its rights because of the fact that it doesn't represent that many people. Surely you're not saying, well, it's only 1 or 3. That's it's okay to discriminate on that basis.
There is no one that should lose their job over a personal decision they make.
Should we have protections against that in our public policies?
I'm going to try to answer your question. Are you finished? Okay.
Should we have protections for those jobs in our public policy? You said no one should lose their job.
You have protection in the U.S. Civil Rights Act that I agree with. Now, I want to finish my statement. Okay? We have those protections in place. What's happening that's wrong, that you seem to completely disregard, is that we are a nation where decisions are made based upon majority votes. Elected officials are elected based upon majority votes. City councils pass their ordinances based on majority votes, as well as the legislature.
But our
And
constitutional rights are not based on majority votes, are they?
our Constitution was passed by a majority when it was agreed to, sir.
But the rights guaranteed therein are not based on majority vote.
Those constitutional rights in the original
But
Constitution...
you're not saying
which,
minorities don't have rights or should not
no,
have...
no, I'm not at all. But I'm saying you cannot force your particular viewpoint, which is a very, very small minutia, a political minority,
because yours is a majority.
No, this is America. We agree on policies and laws that represent the values of the people. We're a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people. And what's been happening lately across this entire country is you have one federal judge here and one federal judge there that can look into Arkansas and say, we know better than you. The Arkansas Constitution is Amendment 83, which protects that marriage is between a man and a woman. Well, what has then happened is that you actually have had a situation where one judge has overturned that. And part of these decisions that are being made that we're talking about today actually are a representation of this movement that is going on across the country.
I think I can bring all this home, because I think you're consistent in your view. You gave a speech, I think it was on the Capitol steps, to a Tea Party rally in 2011. It's become somewhat famous. I like to quote it.
Yeah.
We're going to take this country back for the Lord. We're going to try to take this country back for conservatism, and we're not going to allow minorities to run roughshod over what you people believe in. I defended you when some people said you were talking about African Americans. You weren't. You're talking about what you're talking about now. You believe the mainstream should rule over minority rights, don't you?
I believe, and I'm glad. I'll thank you, by the way, for giving me that grace
You're
in
welcome.
defending, because I definitely am not a racist person, and thankfully I had people stand up to say that was not the
you're
case.
talking about 1 to 3% who are homosexual.
I will get it more specifically to you. That was an informal meeting out here. I'd been elected, I think, about 3 or 4 months. I speak in churches all over. I speak on faith in America. And one thing about politics is that when I'm passionate about something, it will come out very passionate. And what I was talking about is that the Supreme Court in Arkansas, based on a decision of Chris Piazza had made a decision that overturned the vote of the Arkansas people that said that foster children should be placed in homes with mothers and fathers. Again, he was pursuing an agenda in which he said, again, that he wanted children to be placed in homes with couples that were same-sex couples. The people of Arkansas said no. Judge Piazza struck that law down. The Supreme Court upheld it. And I said, I am getting tired, as many people, of seeing the will of the majority of the people of our country overturned by one judge in Pulaski County and representing what is a very small minority interest. And I said, I am tired of seeing those minority political positions being put forward and running roughshod over what the majority of the people think. I challenge you in further thought on this. What kind of country would we have where a small minority gets to put a hook in the nose of the majority of our population and force us to do things that we do not agree with, force us to run our businesses the way we do not want to run our businesses, all of those things? You strike a balance.
Do you believe in the concept
of
judicial review of legislation and the concept that the majority can amount to tyranny over the minority in a democratic society? Do you understand that can happen?
I agree with the 3 branches of government as set up by our founding fathers and in our Constitution. And what's happened is that we now have a judiciary that forgets, in many cases, the precedent that was set. And they have become judicial activists. That is wrong. It's wrong on the federal level and on the state level.
How about for a legislator to write and pass a resolution trying to direct the Arkansas Supreme Court what to rule, as on the appeal of which you did? Does that not also...
Which I was proud was near unanimous, because the legislature stood up for marriage.
We've established you love a majority. We've established that. But is that an appropriate is that an inappropriate blending of the branches of government? Are you stepping over into the right of judicial review and trying to bully with your right of appropriation the judges of the Supreme Court?
I don't know that anybody's touched their appropriation, but what I can tell you is that the legislature was not in session. We were in the interim, and the only thing that we had the ability to do was to pass a resolution to speak. And I will tell you, you ask any legislator, they probably got as many calls on that situation as they did anything else that they ever have up here. We had a lot of people in the state that said, we want you to do something. The only thing that we could do is pass a resolution and say, we want you to respect the Amendment 83, which, by the way, those judges were sworn to uphold also the Arkansas Constitution. And thereby, they actually, that judge, Piazza, voted against, he ruled against the very Constitution that he was sworn to uphold as well. So there's a problem. And many judges have said, by the way, judges are attempting to force upon the population in our country what really should be a political matter. And that's really what it should be. It should be left with the will of the people.
Just like segregation?
No, sir. And that's where...
No, that's a classic case, though. The people of Arkansas voted in their Constitution for segregated schools.
You know what? I thank God for the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, those Bill of Rights. By the way, the Constitution...
Of the U.S. Constitution.
Of the U.S. Constitution.
Would supersede your state Constitution.
Of the U.S. Constitution. But also the 10th Amendment, by the way, is part of that Bill of Rights in the Constitution, which said that rights which are not prescribed to the federal government remain with the states and to the people. And what's happening is we have a crisis of federalism that's gone on not only into health care, it's gone also into the social fabric of the country with what we're dealing with now. It's one thing after another, and people are really tired, and they want to stop this.
I was asking about segregation. I mean, that was a majority at the time, a strong majority view of the people of Arkansas.
Let me tell you something.
You do not support the people's absolute right in Arkansas by majority to pass a racial segregation amendment, do you?
That was wrong.
Or an interposition?
That was wrong. That was wrong.
What's the remedy when it's wrong?
The remedy is just what happened. That was rectified
by whom?
By the way, through the votes of the people. The U.S. Civil Rights Act was a majority vote, John.
No, Brown versus Board of Education was a court decision.
But the U.S. Civil Rights Act of 1964 actually has put it codified into law that you can't discriminate.
So you're saying our interposition or segregation amendment in Arkansas was overturned by the people themselves and the Federal Civil Rights Act by congressional vote, not by the courts?
The courts also had decisions that affected that, but in no way is the current situation in this country have anything whatsoever to do. By the way, the largest group of pastors that opposed what was happening when Judge Piazza had his ruling was a group of African-American pastors that came to this Capitol and actually called me to stand with them. They actually have had a stronger public opposition than anybody.
I understand that, and I understand that you don't want to, we can get into an argument about equating sexual orientation and skin color, but you seem to be issuing a pretty wholesale attack on the right of judges to overturn state laws that the people by majority had supported. But at times in our history, it has been very important that they do that.
Well, in times in recent past, judges that have acted from a perspective of judicial activism have been very detrimental. They have assumed the opportunity that they have had to make law rather than to simply interpret law.
Let's wrap up with a couple of things. Put two things together, because I'm just dying to ask you this. You're quite a social media user, and you've said and you've made some posts that sometimes people have stirred some controversy. I mean, a couple. When Dr. Brantley was returned to Emory University with the Ebola virus, and you were in Georgia to preach a sermon somewhere in Georgia, and
That's correct.
You put on one of the social media platforms that this was near treasonous to bring this person with this disease back on our soil. And then you got, understandably, aghast by the criminality of ISIS, that you went on Facebook and you raised the possibility of a tactical, small caliber nuclear attack. You can defend both of those if you want, but my real question is, do you think you ever have, in your history, have you sometimes reacted with such emotion that you've said something that you later wish you had mitigated or not said, or that you'd like to take back?
Oh, I'm sure there's times when you're defending something that you say something and to emphasize and to basically vent your frustration. I'm sure there are things that somebody might say is a little bit too passionate. But I'm a passionate person. I believe in standing up for what is right, and I believe in doing the right thing. Now, I will tell you, by the way, my position while I was in Georgia is people in Georgia said, don't bring them back. We have the Mercy ships. We have naval hospitals. And by the way, they could have been taken care of. And guess what?
Don't tell me. The majority was in favor of not bringing them back.
Ben Carson agreed with me. The man's one of the most...
How did it turn out?
How did it turn out is that we have had other cases of Ebola that have come out as a result of that being introduced into the country. However, thankfully, they have been saved.
We have had infections based on the fact that Dr. Brantley was returned to this country.
There have been other infections in this country as a result of accidental infection, which could have been totally prevented if they had taken care of them outside of the country. I believe in taking care of the country. You're not saying first.
Specifically somebody caught it from Dr. Brantley?
No.
Okay. But what about
interesting question, and I'm glad you brought that up because, again, maybe your reaction is a little bit incongruent with the fact that I made a statement that many people said we could have handled that without having any possibility of infection in the country.
I guess my question goes to whether you ever go over the top in your emotion, your understandable passion. Because in my line of work, I can count on about every 2 or 3 months, you're going to say something that's going to be said in such a way that it's going to be fodder for a column, because it's going to people are going to think that you've simply gone too far. To call the country near treasonous for trying to treat one of its citizens.
That was a poor decision. Now, I also want to answer your other question on ISIS, because it's really a legitimate issue that you bring up. The Islamic State, ISIS, and by the way, I'm a state senator. It's interesting that you find that my comments are worthy to talk about this, but I'm glad I get an opportunity.
Okay.
The fact is, I was in Israel in May of 2013. I was there when Israel actually launched their attack on a shipment of rockets that were in Iraq. We're probably going to run out of time here. And to hear them talk about the threat to their nation, and that was May of 2013, to hear them talk about that, I personally believe that we have to do everything we can. And what we found is that they have now taken over vast areas in Syria, vast areas in Iraq. They've just overturned the government in Yemen. They are marching through Libya. They are threatening Egypt. Boko Haram, which is the same face with a different name in northern Nigeria, where they're killing thousands and thousands of people just because they're Christians. Those people have to be stopped. And what's happened is President Barack Obama has basically opened the door and said, we're not going to use our nuclear capabilities or some military capabilities if you don't do A, B, or C. He's given them open door. You don't do that. Harry Truman did not want to, I'm sure, did not want to authorize the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but he ended World War II by doing so. I never said that I wanted indiscriminate bombs dropped on civilians, but when I had knowledge of looking at and reading and hearing some people talk about the fact that we have capability to use those bunker busters, which, by the way, you can read about. They had the capability to be nuclear tipped. I said, use those. Get rid of those bunkers. Fight them wherever they're at. So.
Okay. Let's switch gears entirely. Talk about a policy issue since I have you here. You just got named to the task force to consider Medicaid.
Yes.
The solution in this session for the private option was to give it life for a while and to appoint a task force to decide what to do after 2017. You have been a steadfast vote for the private option. How do you see your posture? What point of view do you think you seek to you'll be representing on this task force? And will we have some form of insurance coverage for those people now covered by the private option as we enter 2017 and beyond, in your predicted view?
A lot is going to rest on the King versus Burwell case, again, that's coming up for the Supreme Court. In fact, the Senate just passed a bill today, as a matter of fact, which said we're going to suspend any move to a state exchange in this state subject to the decision in the King versus Burwell state. Again, an overreach of the federal government. And I will say, while you're asking me the question, I've opposed Obamacare since the very beginning. I continue to think it is an overreach. And basically my position has been, John, we have to do the very best that we can for our state and our community because of the cards that we've been dealt. I oppose what has been done, as many have. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not end that situation. They made it worse when they ruled that states now have an option to decide on Medicaid, but then they didn't change the Medicare payment situation. So my role on the task force, I chair Insurance and Commerce. I have now for 2 sessions. I serve on the National Conference of Insurance Legislators, where we come together and discuss these policies on a national level and talk about what's going on in the states. I think that we need a 1332 waiver, which is simply a block grant waiver, where those funds are given to the state of Arkansas and we do with those funds as we need to. And I think Senator Sanders has been talking about that as well with you.
Very good. I believe you're on record asserting that President Obama should be impeached.
I completely feel that President Barack Obama has been one of the worst presidents in the history of this country. He has done through executive order what he could never get passed through Congress with a majority vote. He seems to agree with you that he can just do whatever he wants to do because he feels that is right. I think that is wrong. President Barack Obama has set off firestorms in every state in this country because he is acting more like a dictator and a king than he is a president. I believe that he has usurped his authority, and I believe that much of what he's done is actionable. Listen, if they can impeach President Bill Clinton for his liaisons that he had in the White House.
Which was that what it was about, or was it about lying under oath?
Lying under oath.
Okay.
If they do that, why would you not hold a president accountable that's actually acting outside of the bounds of the Constitution?
So yes, impeach Obama.
For
his executive
if we had
orders.
people with a backbone up there that actually would take action to hold him accountable, as you know, just this week, he says now that he can suddenly raise taxes with a stroke of his pen.
He did not say that.
That's the effect of what he did.
No.
So do I oppose what is happening in our country?
Senator Bernie Sanders, who's quite liberal, said there are ways to close loopholes through the IRS, through regulation. And the White House said, we'll look at that. And then you say that the president said we're going to raise taxes by executive order. Not exactly the same thing, is it?
It's been written, and I actually am basically stating what's been written as news. They were asking the White House press corps, is that what the president would attempt to do? And they said he's exploring his options.
He's exploring it, yes.
And he should not.
Which is not like saying, I'm getting ready to raise taxes by executive order. Just a little bit of a difference.
Well, as for me, here's the thing. When I stood up the rights and the right to life of little babies, you and others say I'm an extremist. When I stand up for the right of marriage between a man and a woman, you say I'm an extremist. When I stand up for the rule of law and the U.S. Constitution, you often say I'm an extremist. So I get used to the fact that liberal columnists and liberal bloggers are always going to oppose what I do, and they're always going to misquote and mistake things.
I think what we've established today is that you believe in the right of the majority, no matter what it says. I believe that's what we've established today.
I believe in the right of a people to rule themselves, pass policies, and to support policies that actually represent the will of the country. I think it's very interesting and very unsettling to have anybody think that me or you, if we represented 1% to 3% of a position on anything, could impose our will upon the rest of the country. That is not democracy, and that is not a republic. Ultimately, everything is decided.
It could be a constitutional government based on prescribed rights in the Constitution.
And we protect
essential judicial interpretation of how those rights apply.
We protect the rights of minorities in this country, but what's happening is you have a completely new arena in which they're trying to piggyback on the civil rights movement as it dealt with race in this country. And many African Americans tell me it's offensive that they do so. Some of the most boisterous opposition that I have heard has come from my friends that are African Americans that are pastors of churches in the state.
Okay. So to wrap up then, you believe that the gay rights movement, same-sex marriage, the right to ban discrimination locally, is an example of homosexual people piggybacking African Americans' gains. That's what you're saying?
I didn't put that exactly the way that you have put it, but they try to associate what they want with what is a very needed, was very needed, and is very important, critical step in our nation's history, which was to do away with segregation and discrimination based upon race. And by the way, lest you forget, it was Republicans that founded the abolitionist movement and made sure that we stood up.
Big fan of Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, but he had others with him.
Yeah. Very good discussion. I thank you for taking
It was very,
time.
very interesting, and
Thank
I'll
you so
tell
much.
you, I appreciate
You
the
gonna
time
shake
with
my
you.
hand?
You bet,
All
you
right.
bet.
All right.
All right,
Thanks
thank
a lot.
you.